Jaya Vivekananda Surai Satchid Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. The question is that why are we revisiting the situations through which Swamiji passed after the parliament was over? First of all, Swamiji was not simply an orator who was preaching and also talking about India's customs and India's society, etc. But he was also a teacher of humanity, earmarked by God himself. So all his big steps and the steps taken and the manner of taking the steps in an alien nation, that has to be studied for our own upliftment. This is the reason why we are going through these things. There was one prince from Russia. His name is Olkansky. He said in a meeting in St. Louis in America that do not ask me to what religion I belong. It is of no importance to you, but it is to him, it is, that is say that is the person concerned, to him it is important. The question is he a man? Judge him by what he sees. There is one man there in the parliament, the embodiment of spirituality. I do not know what church he belongs to. Now, see, a prince from Russia who did not know Swamiji, did not know even which religion he was representing, his impression was this: embodiment of spirituality. That is what he was. So now we have said the last time that he has, after finishing the Midwestern region, he was entering into Detroit and as the guest of Mrs. Bagley. Now, Mrs. Bagley, who was this Mrs. Bagley? She was the vice chairman of the women's section of the World's Fair and the Columbian Exposition in Chicago. She was the widow of the ex-governor of Michigan and was involved personally in many social activities of different types, hospitals, then Sunday classes. He used to give classes on ancient religion, etc. He was interested in anthropology, many things, many societies he was connected with, and she was known throughout because she was the first lady of the state once. Now, being invited by such an illustrious person, you see, Swamiji had both the advantage and disadvantage. Advantage is that he became immediately known to the high society of Detroit. And not only that, the echo of these things goes to other cities. That is one thing. Another thing is that when you are talking to them, you say, and talking about a religion which is not comprehended by Hindus, much less by non-Hindus, there are many risks. And there are missionaries who are feeding the society with all sorts of tales about India. That's why after his passing away, Swamiji's passing away in 1902, in a meeting, Swami Amarananda said, that was in 1903, Then in the last decade, there has been hardly any pulpit in the whole country from which discourses were not given in favor of Swami Vivekananda or against him. That means he created such a ferment that the society, which is normally divided into two parts, the liberal and the orthodox people, the conservative people. So it is that your thing, that the liberal will be there and the reactionary forces will be there. So that came out very much. Now, Swamiji arrived there in the wee hours of 13th February. They very, very late. The train was very, very late. So, and most unearthly hour, he arrived at the station and she was received by the young members of the Bagley family. Now, Swamiji held many, many meetings in Detroit. Major meetings totally will be 8 in the city and many more also outside the city, and many private interviews, including mainly the reporters from newspapers. So on the evening of the 13th, Mrs. Bagley held a gala reception to Swami Vivekananda, in which was invited all the dignitaries of the city, all the representatives of different religions. So it was a very big gathering, and though you see some came with curiosity, others came with maybe a little admiration, others came just to know something about this bizarre religion, Hindu religion. Before he uttered any word, it was a discordant note there. A lady, say, guest, denounced the Swami in most unkindest words, say. But Mrs. Bagley commanded the leading citizens of the city, clergymen and all, to greet her guest on his arrival. That happened. Now, what was the gala reception? It is not for preaching, not for, he mixed with all, tried to befriend all, etc. But in the house, he also gave, as I have said, the interviews to reporters. And these reporters also published those things in the newspapers. Many things he discussed with the reporters. For example, he said to a reporter, so you find in these sayings the shadow of the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. He said, I make a distinction between religion and creed. Religion is the acceptance of all existing creeds, seeing in them the same striving towards the same destination. Creed is something antagonistic and combative. The creed is adapted to the commonwealth where it furnishes what people want. This that means the otherwise called religion and dogma. See, he was making this distinction, and he said that we do not seek to thrust the principles of our religion on anyone. That is one of the main things of Hinduism, because Hinduism considers religion as a very private affair. It is your journey towards the cosmic soul. So it is something very, very much subjective, very much, though certain commonalities will be there, certain disciplines, certain norms will be there, which are common to the religion of all other people. The fundamental principles of a religion forbid that. That means this type of conversion, say, by hook or by crook. Many forms of Hindu religion are spreading far and wide. And he named Christian Science, he named Theosophy, he named The Light of Asia by Edwin Arnold. Light of Asia is regarding Buddha, and Swamiji always considered Buddha as as someone of the Hindu fold, though he had something special to say, but still he is, as he said in the Parliament of Religions, I am proud to belong to the most ancient order of monks, of which Gautama was a member, he said. So throughout, even later on he said, about Gautama Buddha, that he is the Spurana Murti of Vedanta, the shining figure of Vedanta. And he also said in the, if you remember, in the Parliament of Religions, that it is the tragedy of Buddha that his disciples did not understand him. Now the question of the reporter was this: is it below the dignity of a religion to resort to missionary efforts? Then Swamiji quoted from the edict of Ashoka. You see, Ashoka in an edict, he said, Samabaya eva sadhu. When you are concordance, that is good. You should not fight with other things. So he quoted from the edict. You see, the reporter says that he took a book from his side and was reading with correct modulation. The king Priyadarshi, otherwise known as Ashoka, beloved of the gods, honors all sects, both ascetics and householders. He propitiates them by alms and other gifts, but he attaches less importance to gifts and honors than to the endeavor to promote essential moral virtues. It is true, the prevalence of essential virtues differs in different sects, but there is a common basis. That is gentleness, moderation in language, and morality. Thus, one should not exalt one's own sect and decry others, but tender them on every occasion the honor they deserve. Striving thus, one promotes the welfare of his own sect while serving the others. Striving otherwise, one does not serve his own sect while disserving others, and whosoever from attachment to his own sect and with a view to promote it decries others only deals rude blows to his own sect. You see, the whole edict, he was showing that it is in India's tradition. You remember in the Parliament of Religions, he chanted from the Shiva Mahimna Stotra, and of course, Ruchi Idam Chidra, etc., and gave its meaning, which conveys the same idea that all are going through different paths to the same goal. When a reporter asked, after listening to all this, but will it not be an impossibility to find in the great combative Western countries, where such tremendous energy is needed to develop the pressing practical necessities of the 19th century, the spirit which prevails in placid India? That was the question. Swamiji put back the question to the reporter. May not one combine the energy of the lion with the gentleness of the lamb? So this theme became a big strand in his thought, which was in his world mission. He talks about it, of course, in another language, even in Belur Math rules, which he dictated. Say that idea is that both civilizations are incomplete. The Indian civilization is incomplete because it gave too much stress upon the moksha. Thereby, moksha is all right. Moksha is not, moksha is the ideal, but the entire population is not ready for moksha. They need other messages than moksha. So there was the defect. India, say, forgot all other goals of life for the common man and heightened moksha, whereas in the West, they have banished spirituality. See, he was again and again saying, in Detroit, he'd say, Christians, go back to Christ. Go back to one who did not know where to place his head on. You see, it is better to live with Christ in rags than to live in palaces without him. You see, these are his words in Detroit itself. So, in Christianity, for example, there is your do-goodism is highlighted, and what is highlighted is certain times, you see, those who are liberal, they talk about tolerance, that you may not accept it, but you should tolerate others, etc. But the renunciation of Christ is totally occulted in general, especially in the missionary circles. Those who do not, they are exceptions. Say, those who look to the other side of Christ, for example, I can say in the Indian context about Dinabandhu. Dinabandhu was a British clergyman who was received. It's rare for clergies in those colonial days. He was tremendously sympathizing with the Indian nationalistic movement. But he was very much, you see, anchored in Christ. So such people are rare. You see, such people are rare. Or you see, the governor of West Bengal when we were young, A.C. Mukherjee, who was a Christian and who was the vice president of India's Constituent Assembly. I have seen him myself raising funds for the Nepalese translation of the Bhagavad Gita. You can imagine how much liberal he was. Anyhow, other points which came up, you see, is that he said that the question was, is it below the dignity of a religion to do missionary work? You see. And then he answered in that way that it is, we do not try to trust, you see. If questions are asked, we explain, etc., but we do not search at any cost to convert the people into a particular religion, because that is not necessary. But while extolling Emperor Ashoka's tolerance, he also pointed out that India's downfall so far as material advancement is concerned is also due to Ashoka's abhorrence of violence. With this attitude, India failed to confront the bloodthirsty nations, the cohorts from foreign lands. These battalions killed the civil population, looted them, pulled down the places of worship, converted them forcefully into their religion. They taxed the non-converted population heavily. India should remember this, because our country's insignia is adapted from the lion capital of Sarnath, which was erected by Emperor Ashoka. He also remarked, if you remember, in the Parliament of Religions, he would sometimes talk to the reporters, also in the course of his lectures about this. He said that I am proud to belong to a religion of which Christianity, with all its pretensions, is a distant echo. He said this. Now, what was the basis of his saying? Today we know more about this subject because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. But in his day it was not invented. Where did he find it? First of all, certain things opened his eyes. He is a great reader of history books, etc. So there was one Mr. Bigande, who was apostolic vicar in Burma, especially Ava and Pegu area. He wrote a book, The Life of Buddha, where, among many other things, he says most of the moral truths prescribed by the gospel are to be met with in Buddhistic scriptures. In reading the particulars of the life of the last Buddha Gautama, it is impossible not to feel reminded of many circumstances relating to our Savior's life, such as has been sketched out by the evangelists. Now, he noticed this because Christ was from the Jewish community, yet he was heightening this monasticity. You see, he talks about it in no uncertain terms and very clearly. Sannyasa, 100% sannyasa it is totally absent in the religion of the community Jesus comes from. Then the admiration of the saints, which where they are except, it is the Protestantism which tried to reverse it, but it is there still, both among the Catholics and among the Orthodox people. He noticed. Not sure whether he knew all the details, which have been put forward in the book of Aldous Huxley, The Grey Eminence. First part of the book shows very comprehensively that all things, all manuals of especially mysticism, all books, they are they are taken from India and they have passed it into Christianity. Whether he knew all these things, I don't know, but he had an idea about these things. He knew that the early Christians, especially the Christians at Alexandria, etc., including the bishops in those days, they're talking about Brahmins and Shamanas. That means they were there in Egypt, at that time. And because of them, the scene came into being, the Jewish monks and Guru of Jesus and the parents of Jesus were, frequented by this group that is known today. So certain times he would say that it is an offshoot of Hinduism because Buddhism is an offshoot from Hinduism. From Buddhists or Hindus, many ideas have come. And he used to say certain times in his lecture that it is chimerical Christianity, which is much alienated from the Christianity of Christ. That missionary work of conversion is achieved in bulk during famines, etc. That these talks, divided the Detroit city into two parts very clearly. The liberals were supporting him, while the non-liberals, they were crazy about it. From every pulpit, discourses, vehement denunciation of Swamiji's teachings were given. So it was he raised a ferment in the city, and Swamiji withstood all this. And you will see how he tackled these things. A few days before his passing away, Swami Premananda heard him, a kind of soliloquy. Were there another Vivekananda, that Vivekananda would have understood what this Vivekananda has done. This was what he was telling in a kind of soliloquy. On 23rd February, Swamiji left Detroit for Ada, Ohio, a few hours train drive from Detroit. On 22nd February, through the effort of Mr. Palmer again, he was relieved of the contract with the Slayton Lecture Bureau. This Palmer, there are two Palmers, Swamiji, one Palmer family was in Chicago. They were very rich people, and they were influential in making the Congress give a grant of $5 million in those days for the Columbian Exposition. But this is another Palmer here in Detroit, who was the senator, T.W. Palmer. So this T.W. Palmer, helped him to get rid of this lecture bureau who were exploiting Swamiji. There are two identical editorials in the Tribune and Sunday News Tribune, after Swamiji's departure from Chicago, from Detroit, the first, public utterances. And I would read something from it. You'll understand the mood of the city. It said, I'm reading a part of it. It does not seem to be secular. It does not seem to the secular intellect as though Christianity could be imperiled by the public lectures of a single benighted Hindu who stands up and in good Queen's English gives some reasons why he thinks the religion of his country has hardly been judged fairly by the missionaries who have been sent to India. The natural man can hardly perceive why a dozen or score of talented and orthodox divines, brightest examples of Christian learning and culture, should consider it needful to pound the dust all out of their pulpit cushions in declaiming against one poor pagan who stands alone to defend his ancestral religion in a country where he is surrounded by millions upon millions of Christians, and where the fixed habits and customs and social and religious life of the people have been molded by generations of Christians and Christian teachers. You see, this is just to give you an idea that what was going on in those days. That was not alone, Then, a mass, just after his departure from Detroit, a mass meeting of these would-be missionaries were held in Detroit, and this was almost 1,200 people were there. That means young men who would go to different corners of the world to preach Christianity. So this was seen as an answer to Swami Vivekananda's attack on the missionaries. We have said this thing, and so you can understand the mood of the people there in Detroit. Now, Swamiji, where was Swamiji then? All these things were going on. He left Detroit on 23rd of February, and he came back on 9th at the invitation of his friends in Detroit that you come and tackle the situation here. I shall give you a picture, you see, and one lady who later on would come to India and become known to the order as Sister Christine. She was present in all the meetings of the Swami in Detroit. Now she writes, the power that emanated from this mysterious being was so great that one all but shrank from it. It was overwhelming. That is normal, we can understand. And then in this connection, Madam Scott Wood, you see, American poetess, says, you see, that she knew a lady named Miss Cook, who after a meeting, you see, had a handshake with Swamiji. And Swamiji, you see, looked at her and she says, I shall never forget his searching look. And I was so aware of his greatness and holiness that I could not bear to wash my hand for 3 days. So such was the effect of Swamiji's meetings. That means those who had some little reverence, little they gained by his arrest. And this Wood's father himself, who was, he was so much irritated because every journal, every newspaper, their first page was Swami Vivekananda, either for or against their writing. He was so much irritated by this that one morning he appeared in the family dining table with a towel wrapped like a turban on his head, and he was muttering a kind of words which sounded like Sanskrit. That was as a kind of protest. But with all that, this Mrs. Wood, in later days, she would become a Vedantin. So this was the effect. As I have said, the 1,200 young men and women drawn from the whole country, and some of them were from Canada also. When they finished their convention, which is called Student Volunteer Missionary Movement, joyfully the paper Christian Advocate in its editorial said, Vale Vivekananda. They said Vale Kananda, because Vivekananda is a 5-syllable word. It is difficult for the foreigner. So they used to say Vive Kananda. Vive in French means long live. Vive le roi. That means long live the king. So they used to say, many reporters used to report that his name as Vivekananda. So instead of Vivekananda, he's saying Vale Kananda. Vale in Latin means goodbye. That means that means he was some kind of bête noire, they call it, the black sheep. Now, Swami Vivekananda himself said, and this saying is dated 1895, the more I am opposed, the more energy has come out always from me. You see. Now we shall see how he tackled it. First of all, he arrived on 9th March, as I have said, and the next he went first to the Bagley's house, but there was a standing invitation from the Senator Palmer. So in the course of the day, he went to the Palmer's house to become his guest. Palmer was the senator. Now, a meeting was arranged, see, at the Detroit Opera House on 11th March. That means 6 months after the parliament. So Palmer himself introduced Swamiji, saying that we have with us tonight a gentleman who, from the Christian standpoint, I suppose is a pagan, but he belongs to a religion which was old long before ours was thought of by men. I am sure that it will be pleasant to hear from the copper side of the shield. We have looked at him from the silver side. Ladies and gentlemen, Swami Vivekananda. With these words, he introduced. There was an applause, naturally, from the audience, and immediately Swamiji came and launched the subject. And in general, it was it was intended to be answer to the reactionary groups' editorials. That was it. So he says that I do not know about the efforts of Christian missionaries in China and Japan, except through reading the books and literature on the subject. But I can speak about the efforts of Christianizing India. Before I go into this, I want to place before you an idea of what India is. Then he explained in detail how the 300 million inhabitants of India are divided into castes, between which there can be no affiliation, how the natives of the south cannot understand the language of the ones of the north, and vice versa. He told how the lower caste lived on the flesh of the dead animals and never bathed their bodies, and how impossible it would be for the higher class to mingle with them, although they were granted protection of the same laws. That means he was explaining the fourth caste. Originally, in ancient India, the holy trade was the privilege of the three castes, but the lowest caste was not allowed it, and Swamiji says it is because of this question of sanitary questions. He referred to the first appearance of the Christians in an attempt to evangelize the followers of Buddha. He is talking about Sri Lanka. They were Spaniards, he said, and they discovered a temple near Ceylon in which was presented a tooth of Buddha as a sacred relic. The Spaniard Christians thought that their God commanded them to go and fight and kill and murder. And so they seized the tooth of Buddha, destroyed it. By the way, it was not a tooth of Buddha at all, but a relic manufactured by the priests. It was 1 foot long. Every religion has its miracles. You need not laugh because the tooth was 1 foot long. Well, after the Spaniards took away the tooth, they converted a few hundred and killed a few thousands. And there Spain stops in the history of missionary efforts among the Buddhists. Thus he begins. The Portuguese Christians, then he talks about this. The Hindu priest told how as soon as the land came into the possession of the English people, every village had its white colony, which huddled itself together and withdrew from all association with the natives. This continued till India obtained freedom in our lifetime. Then when the missionaries reached the country, they would naturally go at once among the English people who sympathized with them and with whom they would converse. The missionaries know nothing of the native language, he says, and so they cannot dwell with the people. Most of them are married and for the sake of getting their wives into the English society, they identified themselves with all their interests, and doing so directly antagonize the interests of the natives and make it impossible to get in touch with them. We sometimes have famine in India, and so the young missionaries will hang about the fag end of a famine and give a starving native 5 shillings. And there you have him, a ready-made Christian. Take him. That was probably a Baptist missionary, and so when a Methodist missionary comes along, he gives the same native 5 shillings, and his name is again registered as a convert. The only band of converts around each missionary is composed of those dependent upon him for a living. They have to be Christians or starve. The speaker said that the lady missionary goes into certain houses, gets 4 shillings a month, reads the Bible, while the native girls give indifferent attention and teaches them to knit while they pay very keen attention. The girls, like the boys, he said, are always alert to learn practical things, but they will give little heed to the Christian religion, although they will espouse it if it is necessary to get the other advantages. The most of the men whom you send as missionaries are incompetent, he said. I have never known of a single man who has studied Sanskrit before going to India as a missionary, and yet all your books and literature are printed in it, all our books. And he suggested, as an explanation of the visits of the missionaries, that perhaps the atheism and skepticism at home is pushing the missionaries out all over the world. At least for Britishers, it was like that. When in India, he said, he had thought the sole business of Christianity was to send all people to the fires of hell. But since coming to America, he has found that there are a great many liberal men. He referred to the Parliament of Religions and told how a certain editor of a Presbyterian paper had written an article at the close of the Parliament entitled The Lying Hindu, in which he had scored him very severely. In the article, the editor said that while in the Parliament, he was here as our guest, but now that is over, we ought to make an enthusiastic attack against him and his false doctrines. You see, there's an article like that, that he was our guest in the Parliament, okay, that was, but now he should not linger here, we should attack him. In reference to the medical missionaries in India, Kananda said, India requires health, but it must be health for the people. How can you help our people if you do not get in touch with them? When you come to us as missionaries, you ought to throw over all ideas of nationality. Jesus did not go about among the English officials attending champagne suppers. He did not care to have his wife get into high European society. If your missionary does not follow Christ, what right has he called himself a Christian? You want missionaries of Christ. Let such come to India by the hundreds and thousands. Bring Christ's life to us and let it permeate the very core of society. Let him be preached in every village and corner of India. But do not have your missionaries choose their profession as a means of livelihood. Let them have the call of Christ. Let them feel within that they were born for that work. You see, this is the vein in which he was talking. So when he said this, you see, he pacified all the attacks. You see, he said, let them come to India, missionaries by hundreds and thousands, but let them be like this, real Christians. You see. That is the way he tackled it, and in the world, he talked on 11th March continually for 2.5 hours. It was a forceful lecture, and he silenced all his critics.
So, Swamiji,
Yes.
we have left out the question answering session.
Okay.
I have actually requested people to post some questions if they have any.
Yeah. Yes.
So no questions have come so
Yes.
far.
Yes.
But I may ask you one question.
Yes. What is that?
You were saying that Swamiji, he was challenged by some people in a critical way in his lectures.
Not, I should not say challenge. Yes, sometimes challenge that it is wrong. We know that this is this, etc. For example, this crocodile question. Say then this car of Jagannath, under which pilgrims are crushed. Say so. All these things say were put to him. The condition of women.
So my question is actually,
Yes.
has it brought any value or gain after explaining from Swamiji's side to those people who were critical?
Yes, because I shall read from one of the newspapers which were criticizing him, saying that it is on the 18th March, that means a week after his talk, it is more than probable that the placid Hindu has taught us a lesson, and that the fruit of all his work here will be a broadening of our sympathies and some enlargement of our ability to comprehend views upon important subjects that are quite out of the beaten path in which our thoughts and opinions have been accustomed to travel. You see, when a newspaper which was antagonistic was giving this thing, you see, and there were no approach. They say all the pulpits in this city of Detroit, they were shouting, say, against Swami Vivekananda, that this is a black sheep, bête noire. He must be put out. You say, he's poor, he's single, and we are enlightened. We are so many. What can he do against? I say, they saw in him an enemy. Yes. So that is that happened. That was broadening of ideas. It is normal. It is normal in a country where some ideas are given suddenly. You say, Swamiji himself says that once in Boston, he was being chased by ruffians. They will kill him because of his dress. He was running, and suddenly at right angle he entered into a by lane, and they could not trace him. So it is normal. You see, America of today and America in those days are completely different. Even now you are seeing how many Negroes are being killed each month across the country. That means these pockets of intolerance are there. In the 60s, your President Kennedy had to send the federal forces to a university where the governor himself physically came to block the colored people from entering into the university. So Kennedy had to send forces in the 60s, you see. So let us now come to the side of meditation. Let us have this your meditation theme and the gala reception in Mrs. Bagley's mansion in Detroit, where the whole society and representatives of different religions were there, to greet and meet Swami Vivekananda. That will be our first thing. The second thing will be, your theme of meditation will be the different kinds of very searching questions normally uncomfortable questions, you see, hurled at Swamiji. For example, missionaries have told that Hindus, they give their children to the crocodiles as a matter of, you see, that Hindus, you see, normally burn the wives when they become widowed. And they have been told that, you see, they bow to wood and stone and do not know the real God, all these things. So these questions, I say, hurled at him. That would be the second theme. And the third theme will be this, his forceful talk covering different subjects and the dividing this false Christianity from real Christianity, and inviting, you see, the correct missionaries to all countries, including India. You see, this should be our third. You see. So let us begin.